In a distant time, long before the earth knew its 4 seasons, the fields were always green, flowers never withered, and fruits ripened endlessly. The goddess responsible for these blessings was Demeter, the goddess of agriculture and harvest, who cared for the land like a nurturing mother. But she was not alone in her life. She had a beautiful daughter named Persephone, a girl whose features radiated the innocence of youth and the beauty of spring flowers. Persephone loved wandering through the fields and forests, gathering flowers, singing to animals, and spreading joy wherever she went. Her life was carefree and full of happiness, until the day everything changed. That day came when Hades, the god of the underworld, saw her for the first time. Hades, the lord of darkness and death, sat alone on his shadowy throne in the depths of the earth, surrounded by silence and gloom. He knew neither love nor joy, and his heart had never felt anything but solitude and power. But when he caught sight of Persephone wandering the fields from his throne, he felt something strange. Her smile was like a sunlight he had never seen, and her beauty resembled a life he could never attain. At that moment, he decided he wanted her for himself. Taking advantage of Demeter's absence, Hades appeared before Persephone while she was picking flowers in a vast meadow. In an instant, the ground split beneath her feet, and a dark chariot emerged, drawn by black horses as dark as the night. Hades seized her and pulled her into his chariot before disappearing into the depths of the earth, leaving behind a single flower swaying in the wind. When Demeter returned to the fields and found her daughter missing, she was overcome with intense worry. She roamed the entire earth, questioning mortals and gods alike about Persephone's whereabouts, but no one had an answer. Her heart filled with despair, and she decided to abandon Olympus and all the gods, choosing instead to live among humans, not as a benevolent goddess, but as a grieving mother. With her absence, her anger began to manifest on earth. The fields ceased to yield crops, rivers dried up, and the land turned into barren deserts. Humanity suffered from famine, and prayers were lifted to the gods for salvation. But Demeter was unwavering, determined to bring her daughter back no matter the cost. Persephone in the Underworld. In the Underworld, Persephone sat in Hades' hall, surrounded by darkness and cold. At first, she wept constantly, pleading to return to her mother. But Hades was resolute in keeping her. Despite his attempts to appease her with gifts and treasures from the underworld, nothing could bring back her smile. As time passed, Persephone began to accept her imprisonment in this desolate world. However, something strange started to stir within her. She began to see a different side of Hades, a lonely man burdened with a pain no one else could comprehend. Over time, she began to feel a sense of pity for him, and perhaps even a hint of respect. Yet, these feelings were not enough to extinguish her longing for her mother and the life she had left behind. As Demeter continued to refuse her role as the goddess of agriculture, humans began to die from hunger, and chaos spread across the world. At this point, Zeus, the king of the gods, intervened and sent his messenger, Hermes, to the underworld to negotiate with Hades. Hermes demanded that Persephone be returned to her mother in order to restore balance to the world. At first, Hades refused to let her go. However, he realized that keeping her against her will would only breed hatred. Still, he decided to play one last trick. He offered Persephone a pomegranate, a fruit that only grew in the underworld, and convinced her to eat it. What Persephone did not know was that anyone who ate food from the underworld would be bound to it forever. When it came time for her return, Hades revealed the trick to Zeus and Demeter, explaining that Persephone had eaten the pomegranate, which bound her to the underworld for part of each year. After much discussion, an agreement was reached. Persephone would spend 6 months with her mother on earth, and 6 months in the underworld with Hades. When Persephone returned to earth, Demeter's joy was restored, and the land began to bloom again. During the months Persephone spends with her mother, the fields are green, the seasons are warm, and the fruits ripen. This is known as spring and summer. But when it is time for Persephone to leave for the underworld, Demeter falls into sorrow, and the earth ceases to produce, entering a dormant state, this is what we now know as autumn and winter. Thus, Persephone became a symbol of the cycle of life and death, embodying the eternal relationship between sorrow and joy, between love and sacrifice. As for Hades, he retained a small piece of light in his dark world, eagerly awaiting the months when Persephone would return to him, to be his queen, even if only temporarily. Persephone in the Underworld, the Queen of Light in the Kingdom of Shadows. When Persephone was taken to the Underworld, she found herself in a place like no other. Everything in this world was engulfed in an eternal shadow, the air cold and silent, as though time itself had stopped. There were no colors, except for varying shades of black and gray, with only the faint glow from the volcanic rivers surrounding the palace and ghostly lights shimmering on the waters of the river Styx. Hades led her to his palace, a towering structure made of black stone, topped with massive columns that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The palace was imposing, yet it carried a deep sense of isolation. At first, Persephone felt like a stranger in this place. The palace rooms were vast, filled with treasures and precious items, yet devoid of any human warmth. As the days passed, Persephone began to wander through the palace and its surroundings. She saw the souls that had arrived in the underworld, some walking in complete silence, as if burdened by the weight of their past lives. Some were crying, mourning their mortal lives, while others seemed calm, as though they had found peace at last. Persephone started to feel curious about these souls. She approached one that was crying softly and asked, "Why are you crying?" The soul replied in a trembling voice, "I weep for my children whom I left behind. I wish I could have been with them until the last moment." Persephone had never thought much about the pain these souls carried. She had always seen herself as a prisoner like them, but now she began to realize that she had something different. She was still alive. Over time, the souls began to gather around her. While she couldn't ease their suffering, she listened to them. When Persephone spoke to them, a touch of the warmth of life would reach them, even if just for a few moments. The transformation into the Queen of the Underworld. Despite her initial strained relationship with Hades, the two began to talk more. Persephone wondered why he had chosen her and why this world was so dark and desolate. Hades shared with her his long solitude, being the lesser-known brother among the gods of Olympus, and the heavy burden he bore as the god of death. Hades was not cruel to her. On the contrary, he tried to give her what he could. He sent her the most beautiful jewels from deep within the earth. He prepared a whole wing of the palace for her and ordered the souls to serve her. However, this was not enough to fill the void left by the absence of her world above. Little by little, Persephone began to show a new strength. She was no longer the girl who wept for the loss of her world. She sat beside Hades in the throne room, listening to the cases presented by the dead, helping to make decisions. When she saw an injustice, she would intervene to correct it. She added a touch of humanity to the world of the dead, making it less terrifying. One day, the soul of a soldier who had died in war stood before her, begging for one last chance to see his wife and children. The divine law forbade it, but Persephone felt compassion for the soldier. She spoke with Hades and convinced him to grant him that opportunity. This event marked the beginning of Persephone's transformation into a symbol of mercy in the underworld, and she came to be known by the title, the Queen of Light in the Darkness. Over time, Persephone's relationship with Hades changed. He was no longer that dark god who had abducted her out of a desire to possess her. He began to show respect for her opinions and even listened to her advice. In a strange way, Persephone began to see other sides of him. Though he was the ruler of the underworld, he was not the monster she had first thought. He was sad, lonely, but also just and loyal. Still, her true love remained with the world above, with her mother, the flowers, and the blooming fields. But something new began to grow in her heart. It was a mixture of respect and empathy for Hades, perhaps even something deeper than that. It was not a bright love like the sun, but a love that resembled a small flame lit in the dark, warm despite its fragility. Under Persephone's influence, the underworld slowly began to change. The souls were no longer treated as insignificant beings. Persephone started organizing small celebrations, during which the souls were given the chance to remember the happy moments of their past lives. These touches had a profound effect, as the souls seemed less sorrowful, as if Persephone's presence brought a new light to this bleak world. Even the nature surrounding the palace began to change. Strange plants began to grow in the darkness, black and purple flowers bloomed under the dim light. It seemed as though Persephone's presence had given the underworld a new spirit, making it a place more bearable, even in its deepest shadows. Every time it was time for Persephone to return to the upper world, she felt a mix of joy and sorrow. Her longing for her mother in the world of the living was immense, but the thought of leaving behind the souls she had come to care for and leaving Hades behind caused her pain. Each time she left, she carried with her a new kind of sorrow, the sorrow of loss, which had now become a part of her. But her return to the upper world was always a joyous moment. Demeter would open her arms to welcome her, and the fields would bloom once more, the flowers would open. In those months, Persephone would fill her life with joy, but she always carried in her heart the memory of the underworld, where she had left a part of herself. Over the years, Persephone became a symbol of balance between life and death, light and darkness. She learned that love doesn't always come in one form, and that hearts can change and expand in ways we don't expect. In the end, she was no longer just a kidnapped girl, but a queen between two worlds, a woman who carried within her both strength and compassion, embodying the eternal connection between the earth and the underworld. In the land of the dead, where gloom and darkness prevailed, Persephone brought an element that this place had never known before: hope. When the souls saw Persephone, they noticed that her presence was different from anything else in the underworld. She lit up the halls not because she could change the fates of the souls, but because she made them feel that someone cared for them. The souls began to gather around her whenever she passed through the halls, like children gathering around their mother. She listened to their stories and comforted them in their sorrows. Some of the souls spoke of wrongs they had suffered in their lives, and Persephone worked to right some of them with Hades' help. For example, one day, the soul of a warrior arrived who had spent his life oppressing the weak. He was arrogant even in death, expecting to be treated like a king because he had been a ruler in his life. Persephone decided to teach him a lesson in humility, so she made his soul serve those he had wronged. Over time, the warrior began to understand his mistakes, becoming a symbol of repentance among the souls. One day, the soul of a small child arrived, lost and frightened. Persephone felt a strong sense of affection for her, as she remembered her own carefree childhood. She embraced the child and convinced Hades to allow her to stay close to the palace, rather than be sent to the farthest reaches of the underworld, where the unknown souls go. The little girl became a symbol of innocence in this dark world. Before Persephone, the underworld had been governed by rigid laws that could not be broken. Souls were classified according to their deeds in life and sent to their final places without any regard for their human conditions. But Persephone, with her sense of mercy, was able to persuade Hades to make significant changes to the system. Persephone suggested forming a council of ancient souls, those who had endured much pain and learned from it. This council would review the cases of souls who sought a reconsideration of their judgments. The goal was to ensure that souls were treated with fairness, not by the rigid laws. Persephone introduced the idea of temporary oases in the underworld, small places where souls could go to rest and reminisce. These oases were filled with strange trees and eternal flowers that grew in the dark, representing the souls' memories of their lives. The presence of these places alleviated the sadness of the souls. For some souls who had committed grave sins in their lives, Persephone suggested atonement rituals, where the souls were given the chance to work on improving the underworld. This helped transform the realm into a more lively place, where souls saw a purpose in their existence even after death. Thanks to her powerful influence on everything she touched, Persephone began to change the nature of the underworld in unexpected ways. At first, strange flowers appeared in the garden surrounding the palace, dark in color with a faint glow, yet beautiful in a haunting way. These plants were called the flowers of shadows by the souls. These plants had a remarkable ability. When souls touched them, they were reminded of beautiful moments from their past lives. The garden became a sacred place where souls came to catch glimpses of their previous lives, offering them moments of peace amidst the darkness. Among these plants, there appeared a unique one called the pomegranate of shadows, the same type of pomegranate Persephone had eaten. But this time, the pomegranate had a different effect. When souls ate it, they were filled with a sense of inner peace, as though they had found a purpose in their existence in the underworld. Persephone didn't only interact with ordinary souls but also with the most tormented ones. She walked among those who suffered in Tartarus, the deepest and darkest part of the underworld, where souls who had committed the greatest evils were punished. She couldn't change their fate, but she would speak with them, asking them about the reasons behind their actions in life. One such soul was a ruler who had brutally seized his kingdom and betrayed those around him. He was punished by having to carry a massive boulder up a mountain, only for it to fall every time he neared the top. When Persephone spoke to him, she realized that he had been driven by a fear of poverty that he had suffered from in his youth. While she could not end his punishment, she gave him a flower from the shadow garden to carry every time he ascended the mountain, reminding him that he was not alone in his suffering. As the time for Persephone's departure approached each year, the underworld sank into collective sorrow. The souls, who had grown accustomed to her presence, would hold farewell rituals. It was said that there was a small river called the River of Tears, formed by the tears of the souls as they wept whenever their queen left for the upper world. When Persephone returned in the winter, the underworld would celebrate her arrival. The cold halls would transform into places filled with soft, shimmering light, and the flowers of shadows would bloom again. Her presence brought a kind of life, even to the land of the dead. With each influence she had, Persephone struggled with an internal conflict. Did she truly belong to the underworld, or was her existence there merely a consequence of Hades' trickery? But over time, she realized that her strength lay in her balance between the two worlds. She embodied the true meaning of living between light and darkness, and she became a source of inspiration to every soul she encountered. Persephone had become more than just a queen, she had become a bridge between life and death, between hope and despair. She proved that even in the deepest darkness, light could find its way. The relationship between Persephone and her mother, Demeter, was more than just a mother-daughter bond. Demeter, the goddess of agriculture and fertility, saw in Persephone the embodiment of all that was beautiful and vital. For Demeter, Persephone was more than just a daughter, she was a symbol of hope and renewal. But after her abduction by Hades, this relationship became a complicated blend of deep love and burning pain. When Persephone returned to the upper world in the spring, Demeter greeted her with an overflow of joy. The fields would bloom, and the earth would transform into vibrant colors, as if the world itself was celebrating the return of the lost daughter. Mother and daughter spent long days in the mountains and valleys, talking about all that had passed, with Persephone sharing stories about the souls of the underworld. But with every winter, and with each farewell, hearts broke again. Demeter would withdraw into her solitude, leaving the earth to suffer from cold and drought, a reflection of her sorrow at Persephone's absence. After Zeus mediated and agreed to divide Persephone's time between both worlds, the first reunion between Persephone and Demeter was filled with emotion. When Persephone appeared on the horizon of the earth, Demeter was waiting for her at the foot of a mountain, surrounded by barren fields that were preparing to regain their green. Demeter rushed towards her daughter and embraced her tightly, as if fearing she might lose her again. Persephone spoke of the underworld, of the souls that dwelled in the dark, and how she had begun to feel a responsibility for them. But her mention of Hades stirred mixed emotions in Demeter. On one hand, she was furious at the god who had abducted her daughter, but on the other hand, she sensed a change in Persephone's tone, as if she harbored some compassion for him. The struggle between Earth and the Underworld. The conflict between Persephone and Demeter ran deep. Persephone found herself torn between her love for her mother and life on Earth, and her responsibilities as queen in the Underworld. One day, after Demeter expressed her displeasure with the Dark Kingdom, Persephone, frustrated, said, "Mother, I am not a prisoner as you think. I am a queen there, and I help the souls who have no one to care for them. Yes, I love Earth, but I am no longer just your daughter. I am more than that now." These words were shocking to Demeter, but they also made her realize that Persephone was no longer the little girl she once knew. She had grown into a mature woman, capable of adapting to her life in both worlds. In one of the years, Demeter felt that the loss of her daughter had become too much to bear. She decided to keep Persephone with her at any cost. When the time came for Persephone to return to the Underworld, Demeter refused to let her leave. She cloaked the earth with snowstorms and threatened to make winter eternal if her daughter was not allowed to stay. But Persephone, despite the pain of seeing her mother in this state, stood firm and said, "Mother, I know you're doing this because you love me, but there are souls in the Underworld waiting for me. If I don't go, their lives will become unbearable. I cannot be just your daughter, I must also be their queen." These words were enough to break Demeter's stubbornness. She realized that if she clung to Persephone anymore, she might lose her forever. With heavy tears and words whispered to the wind, she finally allowed her to leave. "I will wait for you, my flower." Over time, Demeter began to realize that Persephone's presence in the Underworld was not merely a loss, but also a part of the natural cycle of life. She came to see that the division of time between Earth and the Underworld was not just a curse, but a necessary balance. Each time Persephone returned, life blossomed on Earth. And every time she left, the world learned the value of renewal and patience. Demeter set a new goal for herself: to make the months when Persephone was on Earth as meaningful as possible. She worked the fields herself, organizing grand celebrations in honor of her daughter, as if to show the world the joy of her return. As their relationship matured, the collaboration between Persephone and Demeter took on new forms. One year, when Persephone returned, she asked her mother to help the souls in the Underworld by planting certain plants on Earth that would serve as symbols of hope. Demeter agreed and planted fields with flowers like daffodils and violets, which became symbols of Persephone and the souls she cared for. Furthermore, Persephone began sending messages with the wind to her mother from the Underworld, telling her about her condition and the stories of the souls she had helped. These messages acted as a bridge between the two worlds, easing Demeter's sorrow and making her feel that her daughter was near. In the end, the relationship between Persephone and Demeter became a symbol of a love that endures through the toughest of circumstances. The separation between them was never easy, but they learned that true love doesn't mean holding on to someone, but allowing them to be themselves, even if that means being far away. Persephone would always say, "Mother, I am with you even when I am in the Underworld. Because my love for you knows no darkness." And Demeter, in turn, would whisper to the earth with every winter, "You will return to me, and with you, spring will return." Dear viewers, please engage with us by leaving objective feedback in the comments and suggesting topics you'd like to learn more about. And, of course, show your support by subscribing to the channel. Have an amazing day.